Yat e bene. Good morning, my relatives. Or actually, not yat e bene, it's just yat e. Hello, my relatives. It is Wednesday afternoon on December 4th. Here I am in my studio in Washington, D.C., sitting down with my second cup of coffee. And I want to have a discussion about the pardon that President Biden, gave to his son Hunter over the weekend, and what I think might be a unique opportunity to advocate for bipartisan criminal justice reform in our country. But before we get into that discussion, I want to do like I always do and acknowledge I'm speaking to you from what's now called Washington, D.C. These are the traditional lands of the Piscataway, and I want to honor the Piscataway as the hosts of the lands where I'm living. I want to thank the Piscataway for their stewardship of these lands. I want to just remind myself and others how humbling it is to be walking, moving, living, breathing, uh, living on these lands today. And I want to humbly thank my Piscataway relatives, my Piscataway relatives, for your stewardship of these lands. So it is already December, and there is, as usual, a lot going on. There's going to be a lot going on for the next 4 years with this new administration coming in and all the things that are going on around our country. But I want to talk about a move that Joe Biden made over the weekend, just before he left on his first trip to Africa. And I'm going to be talking about that hopefully later this week or next week, because he's been promising to go to Africa and to make Africa one of the centers of his foreign policy, and yet it's not until the end of his term in office that he finally gets around to actually going to Africa. But I want to talk about that later. But today I want to talk about the pardon that Joe Biden gave to his son Hunter over the weekend. So before I jump into that, let's see who's online with me. Charlene Yate, thanks for joining. Good to have you here. George Yate, thanks for joining all the way from the Pacific Northwest. I'm looking forward to being there next weekend. In 2 weekends. I'm going to be there for the next 2 weekends, I should say. Next weekend, I'm going to Portland, and I'm doing two events in Portland, and I want to share with you the details of that event. The first is on Sunday morning. This coming Sunday, December 8th, I'm going to be at the Great Spirit United Methodist Church in Portland, Oregon. I'll be preaching at their service at 11 a.m. that morning. And they stream their service live on Facebook. And so if you find the Great Spirit United Methodist Church webpage on Facebook, and I'll share the link later on my social media later this week, but I'll be preaching at 11 a.m. Pacific time this Sunday. And I'm still bringing my sermon together, but I'm basically going to talk about, as Indigenous peoples, what's attractive to us, if anything, about Jesus and the Christmas story. I know I want to talk about where do we get drawn in as Indigenous peoples into that story. As you know, most churches during the season are going through the Advent calendar, and so I'm going to be preaching on some passages in the Advent calendar, looking at the birth of Jesus, and I'm going to be talking about how is that significant? Why is that significant to Indigenous peoples, if it is at all? Second, that evening on December 8th, I'm going to be speaking at Great Spirit Church in the evening, and I'm going to be doing a session specifically on decolonizing health. And I'm going to be speaking on decolonizing health, the difference between Indigenous wisdom and scientific knowledge. Sharing some of my story of my own journey to decolonize my health over the past year, but really discussing why it is that Indigenous wisdom has been thrown aside, and Western nations have, as they colonized the world, tried to start over all of their learning and understanding based on their scientific knowledge, completely ignoring the wisdom of Indigenous peoples who have lived in these places for hundreds, even thousands of years. So we're going to be talking about that on Sunday evening. If you're in the Portland area, this is both those, the service in the morning and the one in the evening at 6 p.m. at Great Spirit United Methodist Church are free and open to the public. You're welcome to come, and I'm excited to be able to be there. The next weekend, I'm going to be in Seattle, and I'll share some of those events this next week coming up. We're still finalizing and getting all the promotional stuff for that together, but I will be up in Seattle. And just to give you a brief rundown, on December 12th, I'm going to be at Seattle School of Theology. And that will be for an event 7 to 9 p.m. Pacific time. That event is open to the public. I thought that was going to be only a faculty and staff event, but it's open to the public, and they're going to live stream it. So that will be coming up. And then on Friday, December 13, I'm going to be out in Gig Harbor at Agnes Day Lutheran Church doing an event on unsettling truth. And then on Saturday evening, I'm going to be at Rainier Avenue Church in Seattle. This is on December 14th, talking about decolonizing health, a very similar presentation to what I'm giving in Portland the week before. And then on Sunday morning, I'll be preaching at New Light Christian Church. And I will be part of their service that morning at 11 a.m. Pacific time. That's also in Seattle. And I'll be preaching on radical inclusivity at that service. So some events coming up this next couple weeks, as I have quite a bit of travel yet before the end of the year. But I wanted to share some of those dates and times with you. I'm grateful for everyone who's here. Joe, Yate, thanks for joining this morning. Please, everyone, grab a cup of your favorite morning beverage, whatever it may be, coffee, tea, milk, water. No sodas, but maybe that is your favorite drink of the morning. But anyway, yeah, I'd love to have a discussion as we talk about some of the things going on. And specifically, I want to talk about the pardon that Joe Biden gave to his son. So first, to begin that discussion, let me put this link into the chat. And if you remember, throughout his term in office, Joe Biden has been adamant, right? He was going to be the anti-Trump. He was not going to do his foreign policy over Twitter. He was going to speak in more complete sentence structures. He was going to not be as bombastic and all that stuff. And he was not going to use the advantage of the presidency to pardon his own family. He was very clear about that from the beginning, right? Because when Donald Trump left office, he gave a ton of pardons, many to his friends and colleagues, and even one to his son's father-in-law. And Joe Biden was adamant he was not going to use his office for the benefit of his family, especially as his son Hunter got into more and more legal trouble. He was adamant he was not going to pardon his son. And then over the weekend, he released this statement. And I'm going to put this in the link right now for you. And I'm going to read this statement for you, and let me bring it up. I'll actually bring it up. This is on the White House's website. So I'm going to bring it up onto the screen here. And I'm just going to read this statement for you. It says, "Today I signed a pardon for my son Hunter. From the day I took office, I said I would not interfere with the Justice Department's decision-making, and I have kept my word, even as I have watched my son being selectively and unfairly prosecuted. Without aggravating factors like use of a crime, multiple purchases, or buying a weapon as a straw purchaser, people are almost never brought to trial on felony charges solely for how they filled out a gun form. Those who were late paying their taxes because of serious addictions, but paid them back subsequently with interest and penalties, are typically given non-criminal resolutions. It is clear that Hunter was treated differently. The charges in this case came about only after several of my political opponents in Congress instigated them to attack me and oppose my election. Then a carefully negotiated plea deal agreed to by the Department of Justice unraveled in the courtroom, with a number of my political opponents in Congress taking credit for bringing political pressure on the process. Had the plea deal held, it would have been a fair, reasonable resolution of Hunter's cases. No reasonable person who looks at the facts of Hunter's case can reach any other conclusion than Hunter was singled out only because he is my son, and that is wrong. there has been an effort to break Hunter, who has been 5.5 years sober, even in the face of unrelenting attacks and selective prosecution. In trying to break Hunter, they've tried to break me. And there's no reason to believe it will stop here. Enough is enough. For my entire career, I have followed a simple principle: just tell the American people the truth. They'll be fair-minded. Here's the truth. I believe in the justice system, but as I have wrestled with this, I also believe raw politics has infected this process, and it led to a miscarriage of justice. And once again, I made this decision this weekend. There is no sense in delaying it further. And once I made this decision this weekend, there is no sense in delaying it further. I hope Americans will understand why a father and a president would come to this decision. So that was what he said. And this was in opposition to what he said throughout his entire career. Now, if you remember, when Donald Trump issued a slew of pardons 4 years ago, people were up in arms. And he was pardoning his friends, he was pardoning his colleagues, and he was pardoning even his own family. And people were up in arms about, how dare you do this? This is a miscarriage of justice, blah, blah, blah. And Joe Biden promised he wouldn't do those things. And over the past 4 years, actually over the past 8 years, President-elect Donald Trump, has been adamant that the criminal justice system has been weaponized and has been used to prosecute him and his family and his colleagues and his friends and so on and so forth. Now, please do not think I am defending Trump, because I'm not. But this is a really interesting turn of events, because we now have 2 presidents in a row, 3 terms in office, right? First Trump, then Biden, and now Trump again, who have now publicly stated they do not trust the criminal justice system. Joe Biden said, I believe in the criminal justice system, but it's been weaponized. Yeah, that's what we've been saying, Joe, for a long time. That's what people of color, Black, Indigenous, other people of color have been saying for a very, very, very long time. This system is absolutely weaponized. This system is absolutely unfair. Right? Even the fact that enslavement is still legal according to the 13th Amendment in our criminal justice system. Neither slavery nor involuntary servitude, except as a punishment for crime, whereof the party has been duly convicted, shall exist within this nation. Both of our presidents agree that the criminal justice system has been weaponized and cannot be trusted. As an advocate for criminal justice reform, as someone who's run for president in 2020 on a platform to address the systemic racism, sexism, and white supremacy in our foundations, as the only candidate who talked about in 2020 that it was our foundations and our institutions that was causing things like the lynching of George Floyd. Trump said, let's just ban a couple chokeholds. And Biden said, let's just train people to shoot people in the kneecaps instead of in the chest. Those were their solutions to these systemic problems. But now both of these men, as they, their families, and their friends have come under attack by the criminal justice system, have now agreed with Black, Indigenous, and other people of color in what we've been saying for hundreds of years, which is this system is a weapon against our people. and we need to fix it. But the problem is neither Joe nor Trump are willing to fix it. They merely use the system and their role as commander in chief to pardon their family and friends. This is a problem. I'm going to put a few more articles into the chat here. This is an AP article on Joe Biden's pardon of his son Hunter's, and how this spurred a discussion about who else should be granted clemency. It says in here, Biden's decision to offer his son a blanket pardon for actions over the past 11 years has sparked a political uproar in Washington after the president repeatedly said he would not use his extraordinary powers for the benefit of his family. Biden claimed that the Justice Department has presided over a miscarriage of justice. I think those are Trump's words, in prosecuting his son. And again, this article says, using some of the same language that Trump uses to describe his own legal predicaments. And there's a fairly short list of U.S. presidents who have used the pardon to benefit their families. Fairly short list. And Joe Biden joins that list. That list, by the way, includes Joe Biden, Bill Clinton, and Donald Trump. 2 Democrats and a Republican. And if you're wondering about my comments about Trump's statements regarding the criminal justice system, I mean, he talks about this all the time. This is just one article in The Guardian where he talked about the justice system was weaponized against him by the Biden administration. Now, to be fair, a few Democrats have come out and been critical of what the president did over the weekend, but none of them are his broadest supporters. I haven't heard anything from Elizabeth Warren or from Bernie Sanders or from any of the other people who even ran against him. Kamala Harris hasn't said anything. I haven't heard Cory Booker say anything about it. And yeah, there's been the party has been fairly muted, and all the Democrats who were campaigning for Kamala and for Biden before that, and decrying the things Trump did and promised to do, most of those people are silent now, as Joe Biden has used his powers to protect his son. Again, the part that irks me the most is he makes a fairly strong case. He lays out the fact that, yeah, in any other case, if it was just some other random person, you should be clear, Joe, not just any other person, any other white person, okay? It says here in this paragraph, and I'll just share this with you so you can see it again. Let's just read this again. I want to share this with you one more time. Let's read this one more time, because we have to be very clear. This is talking about white people, okay? It's not talking about, let me try to give this a bit better look here. Where can we go? Yeah, let's do this. Okay. So in this statement, I just want to be very clear. Without aggravating factors like use in a crime, multiple purchases, or buying weapons as a straw purchaser, people are almost never. Now, no, this is not people are almost never. White people. Okay, Joe, you have to be clear about this. White people are almost never brought to trial on felony charges solely for how they filled out a gun form. This needs to be white people, Joe. Okay, this is not just people. those who were late paying their taxes, again, those white people who were late paying their taxes because of serious addictions, but paid them back subsequently with interest and penalties, are typically given non-criminal. Again, you're talking about white people, Joe. You're not talking about all of us. Black, indigenous, and other people of his colors have for decades, if not centuries, been subject to these types of prosecutions and these types of weaponizing the criminal justice system against them. So we have to be very clear, Joe, when you are talking here, you are talking about white people. Your son is white. And the problem is your son is being treated like a person of color in this criminal justice system. And again, I agree, that's not fair. That is not fair. I doubt this plea deal that was offered here would have happened for many people of color. I doubt that. I'm not positive, but I doubt that. So he says in the third paragraph, he says, no reasonable person who looks at the facts of Hunter's cases can reach any other conclusion than Hunter was singled out only because he is my son, and that is wrong. There's been an effort to break Hunter, who has been 5.5 years sober, even in the face of unrelenting attacks and selective prosecution. And tried to bring Hunter, they've tried to break me, and there's no reason they'll stop here. Enough is enough. This is the very same thing people of color have been saying, right? When African people were freed from the shackles of chattel slavery, our Congress, our president, Abraham Lincoln, did not abolish slavery. He redefined and codified it, protected it constitutionally in the 13th Amendment, so that these unrelenting and selective attacks and prosecutions could continue against Black and people of color. This criminal justice system has been trying to break our communities of color since it was founded. Joe Biden is describing what people of color have been saying for decades, if not centuries, about our criminal justice system. It is not fair. It is used selectively and has been weaponized against certain individuals. Yes, a few times it was used against white men or a few of white men's family members and friends. But the bulk of the time, it's used in even worse fashion against people of color. Now, I would have loved if Joe Biden, right, if you want to pardon your son, and I completely understand the desire to protect your family. I'm not faulting you for that desire. I am faulting you for breaking the promise you made, which is you said you wouldn't do it. But I'm not faulting you for the desire to protect your family and your loved ones, right? We all have that desire. But because you applied your solution selectively, Mr. President, because you applied it selectively and only applied it to your son and didn't acknowledge, in fact, you said you believe in the criminal justice system, I just don't think it should have been used against my son. That's not, you missed a massive opportunity to fix something that is systemically wrong within our country, Mr. President. If you read the article in the AP News that said some Democrats are frustrated, One of the reasons they were frustrated is because they believe this lost them the opportunity to paint themselves as the heroes and Republicans as the villains. It's really fascinating how both of these men, white men, white landowning men from the upper echelons of the 1%, experienced how our criminal justice system has been weaponized, experienced and felt the same way many of our people of color have felt as we've watched family members and friends and community members be unfairly prosecuted by this criminal justice system. And instead of using that as empathy and understanding to realize what we're experiencing, they merely use their privilege to protect themselves and their family members and did nothing about the fact. In fact, Biden was adamant, this system's fine. It just got misused here. No, it's not fine, Mr. President. This is the entire point we've been trying to make. And what I'm most disappointed about right now is the deafening silence by Democrats. Not just those in the administration, but people I know who advocate for justice issues and are screaming at the top of their lungs right now about Trump and what he's going to do and what's going to happen over the next 4 years. And they are silent on the fact that the party they've been advocating for, campaigning for, fighting for, is doing the exact same thing, using the very same language that Trump is using. And they're not calling them out for that. This is the problem with our two-party system, my relatives. This is the problem. It turns us, those who participate in it at least, into both protesters and lobbyists. It's done it to the church. It's done it to people who are fighting for justice. It turns us into protesters and lobbyists. We protest when our party of choice is out of power, and we lobby when our party of choice is in power. We exaggerate the flaws of the opposing party, and we minimize the flaws of our party. And we're never going to make progress this way. It's not going to happen. We have to speak the truth. So this is why I wanted to talk about this today, my relatives. Because I didn't want us to get sucked in to this binary paradigm that our system puts us in. And realize and miss an opportunity to advocate for real justice, right? The Democrats and Republicans agree. Joe Biden and Donald Trump agree. They both agree our system has been weaponized. We should be capitalizing on that, using that, compelling them, persuading them, protesting them to have integrity and act on that. Because what they felt for their friends, their colleagues, their family members is what people of color feel on a daily basis regarding our criminal justice system. And they tasted that. And if we don't tell them what's going on, they're going to miss the opportunity to make some corrections. I'm going to be talking about this probably a lot over these next 4 years. Because we already know, right? Trump has made it very clear he absolutely plans to weaponize the criminal justice system and to prosecute those who are seen as his enemies and who have slighted him. He said that. He's willing to do that. And the Democrats are going to decry that. And we need to remind them that they missed an opportunity to make some systemic change because they refused to call out their own party when their party experienced how this system is weaponized and chose instead to apply an individual band-aid just to protect the president's family instead of a systemic fix, which would have brought relief to millions and millions and millions of people. My relatives, we need to keep our eyes open. I am not in any way, shape, or form advocating for Trump. I am working as hard as I can to bring a bipartisan, fair and honest critique to these next 4 years, because I'm expecting there are going to be some difficult years. But we can't just fall into the binary, which is the Republicans are going to say everything's great and the Democrats are going to say everything's horrible. And I want us to be able to see more clearly what's going on so that we can motivate ourselves even harder to work towards actual fixes to our system. And that's my goal. My relatives, I appreciate you so much. I hope you've enjoyed your second cup of your favorite morning beverage as much as I've enjoyed mine. I have a lot of travel coming up next week. I'm hoping to do one more second cup of coffee this week. And then I'm going to be traveling next week. I'm going to be in Portland next weekend and the Seattle the weekend after that. And in the middle, I'm going to be in LA for a few days. I may be able to do a second cup of coffee when I'm in LA. So I'll see how my schedule works out while I'm there. I'm not speaking there. I'm just going to be there on a writing retreat with my co-author for a few days. But my relatives, I appreciate you. If you would like to follow me more in depth and help keep my voice independent, one of the ways you can do that is to subscribe to my Patreon. I have not monetized most of my social media. I don't get paid for the advertisements that go on my YouTube channel. I haven't monetized other parts of my social media, but I do have this Patreon site where you can subscribe to me and you'll get regular posts. You'll get all of my videos that I put up will be posted on Patreon ad-free. There's a monthly Q&A. There's in-depth discussion about the book I'm writing, Decolonizing Faith, as well as other things I'm putting out there to join the conversation a bit deeper. And there's even a consulting tier where if you want to ask some more deeper questions or talk about how things apply specifically to your institution or your situation and what I'm talking about, how that fits in there, I'm happy to do some consulting at that. And that's available also on my Patreon site. So it's a great way. And this is one of the ways that I help keep my voice independent. So if you would like to subscribe to me there, I welcome you to do that. And also, of course, you can buy copies of my book, Unsettling Truth, The Ongoing Dehumanizing Legacy of the Doctrine of Discovery. And if you want to bring some friends into a book study, I have my book study special where if you buy 10 signed copies of the book from my website, I will give your study a free 45-minute virtual Q&A that you can schedule with me over the next year after you make the purchase. And so it's a great way to kind of jump in the dialogue a little bit deeper there too. My relatives, Akihat, thank you for joining me today. Steve, glad you could jump on. Great to see you here this morning. Thanks for being here. I hope you all have a great day. Walk in beauty, my relatives, and may we all learn how to walk in beauty together. Shahat and Hakonet.